Ubers that are banned from Ubers. For those without context, Ubers is a Smogon format, Smogon. I think that's the German name for coughing, I think. I'd have to remember specifically. But it is, think of it like the upper echelons. Think like S plus tier in terms of power level, in terms of Pokemon.
These are the Ubers that are actually banned from the Ubers tier, featuring BKC as always, and of course, PokeaimMD.
Yeah, so
Very big
Mega
name,
Rayquaza, the way I see it, was Terrakion in Black and White 1. You give it to anybody, and they can win with it. You think that's a fair comparison, Kevin?
I've actually never heard of Terrakion in Black and White. Then again, I didn't play Ubers in Black and White. I hardly played... No, I didn't even play VGC in Black and White now that I think about it. That was before I started getting to VGC. So, I feel like this would track, though. I feel like I vaguely remember Terrakion being good.
I think so, yeah.
Choice ban, and it just
Terrakion in Black and White 1 had no real answers. So no matter what you did with your team, then when Terrakion came in, and it would come in, then you were at significant risk of deletion.
Pokemon can be good, not necessarily because it has the best stats in the game, but because it doesn't have a good answer. So, I mean, there were many weird interactions over the years with Pokemon. One of the most infamous that I like citing is the Wobbuffet leftover stall in Gen 3. So in Gen 3, leftovers healed more than struggle would deal on Wobbuffet, and Shadow Tag worked a lot differently than it did now. So what that means is Shadow Tag now, I think it doesn't trap Dark and Ghost types. I think it's been way too long. And there's another thing it doesn't block. I'd have to remember. I haven't touched Pokemon in about 2 months at this point, in at least any real capacity. So forgive me for my memory failing a little bit. But Prankster in Gen 3 was arguably at its peak. It was the strongest it ever has been. And so 2 Wobbuffets with Shadow Tag could come out. I think Shadow Tag users, actually, they can swap out from each other. But anyways, 2 Shadow Tag Wobbuffet can come out, right? And neither of them can switch out. Because not only moveset, but they just can't swap out. Shadow Tag keeps the other Pokemon in. So thus you have 2 Wobbuffets, they're going to run out of moves eventually, and they're going to hit each other with Struggle only dealing X amount, while Leftovers heals Y amount, where Y is greater than X. So thus, you enter this permanent battle where there's 2 Wobbuffets that are on the field, and you cannot physically end the fight at that point. A Wobbuffet will never get knocked out. So, I mean, there's always interactions like that. Coming back to, a Pokemon doesn't have to necessarily be the best. Wobbuffet definitely has its niche interactions. I'm not saying it's the best by any means. There's some crazy stuff you can do with Wob, don't get me wrong. If something doesn't have answers, though, so say something like Regieleki. In a certain vacuum, Regieleki could be absolutely oppressive, 100%. In a vacuum, depending on the format, I mean, you could have Kyogre, Primal Kyogre, even just be absolutely oppressive if something can't check it. And that, I mean, I guess we could just go with more realistic example, right? Garchomp back in Gen 4. Garchomp wasn't uncounterable, but it was really hard because of the sheer variety of sets Garchomp could run. Garchomp back in Gen 4 was an absolute menace.
Exactly, and not to mention that the obvious increase in stats, but also the fact that this Mega Pokemon could hold items it's incredibly faster, right? Like it's faster than Rayquaza's best check, right? Lugia would be
the Great Wall.
The number one mon you could think that could deal with a Rayquaza. This one's faster than that, and obviously deals
the biggest balancing point for Rayquaza, normal Rayquaza, I'd argue, is that 95 speed, because Garchomp outspeeds that. Suddenly, Chomp is not outspeeding that, and actually, Mega Chomp loses 10 points in speed or 12 points in speed. It goes down to a 90-92, right? It actually loses speed, which is why I'm really sad that Mega Chomp wasn't as good as it was. That could have been. That 115 is really good. On top of it breaking the convention of every other Mega Pokemon, Primals aren't technically Megas. They're technically Megas, but they're not Megas, if that makes sense, because it utilizes a similar mechanic, but not the same mechanic. You can Primal Revert, and you can Mega Evolve in the same battle. So it's being considered not a Primal, but a Mega, and you being able to hold an item. You could Sash Mega Rayquaza. You could Life Orb Mega Rayquaza. Those are very popular set. You could Choice Band Mega Ray. And it with its ability as well, which I'm sure they'll get into, it was incredibly oppressive. There's a reason that Wolf Glick won was 2016 World Championships with it.
+2.
It can take the hits and it's faster, right? But
exactly.
Now it can't take the hits and it's slower.
Yeah, exactly. Also, you have obviously your Delta Stream, so your ice type attack is 2 times instead of 4 times, which does make a difference when a Pokemon is based 105 HP and 100 defenses across the board.
It gets bulkier too, as if all the rest of them.
Mega Ray is a problem.
It has everything good about being a flying type and none of the downsides. And there are a lot of good things about being a flying type.
Exactly. It would just be basically, and then the fact you can run Focus Sash, Lumberry to set up on Thunderwave, which there was a plethora of in the Ubers.
Lumberry is also a very popular choice because it ensures that you get things off where you can have something come in like, it doesn't get rid of Taunt, but so say, for example, if you have a lead that's just going to spam T-Wave, or a lead that's going to, Spore you. Say you have, for some reason, Breloom out, right, and you use a Spore, or even Amogus, if you will, right? And it hits you, oh, cool, I've dealt with it. Lumberry, while you're not getting the offensive boost that you had from like a Choice Band or a Life Orb, you could absolutely have Lumberry as insurance to, okay, I see that you status me. Now that's not going to be effect. Sure, I lost my item, but now you are negative tempo to me. You have effectively lost that turn. It's a very good play.
Tier.
Oops, sorry.
It's hard to argue for this Mon ever staying. It had extreme speed for any choice Mons that were faster, and because of its Delta Stream ability, it was almost impossible to knock out. It was really hard to kill this Mon from full with an attack like any super effective ice type attack, right? Like Scarf Ogre and things like that. And then when it comes to Pokemon like Scarf Palkia and stuff,
Delta Stream effectively nullifies the flying type weakness. So you know how like Kyogre and Groudon set their own weather? So Kyogre sets rain, Groudon sets sun. Their primal reverted states set Desolate Land for Groudon, which nullified water moves. And you had Primordial Sea, or is it Primordial Ocean? I think it's Primordial Sea specifically for Primal Kyogre that nullified fire type moves. Now, it didn't quite nullify them, but now you just get rid of your flying weakness. So suddenly, instead of being 4x to ice, you're only 2x to ice. So that Blizzard might not knock you out now. And now, instead of, I'm trying to remember what it had specifically. What I can say is that it did nullify weaknesses to the flying type specifically. So thus, technically making you bulkier as well. Mega Ray has a lot in its kit.
It's +2 Life Orb with its 180 base attack and Stealth Rock are up, you're killing it with E-Speed. So it's just really hard to get inverses, and especially in the metagame it was in, like Stab Flying was so good.
Stab Flying
Pokemon,
is great.
Right? Dragon Ascent, 120 base power prior to...
Dragon Ascent, think of it just like a flying type close combat. That's effectively what it is, right? Not superpower. It's flying type close combat. It's just a type swap move off of a really powerful Mon. That is the power of Mega Ray.
Stab, and having the option for Swords Dance and Dragon Dance. Like, games would also just come down to speed ties with Rayquaza versus Rayquaza. I remember that a lot when playing the actual Ubers tier. This was probably the Mon that deserved
they deserve the ban, 100%.
Yeah, we didn't even mention Choice Band. Like, you could use Choice Band, Dragon Ascent, and V-Create, which you had back then.
I disagree with this, honestly, and I feel the Smogon community might get a little nitpicky with me. You cannot use V-Create outside of Gen 5, and even if you have Gen 5, the reason why is it was a Japanese event, and this is actually relevant. I'm going to segue because of my, I used to be a Pokemon professor, right? And I don't think I am anymore. I think that expired, and it's fine. We don't have any events in Idaho that I would bother attending, so I digress. But why I cite this is I've read the documentation, right? I've had to read the documentation of being a professor. I've had to read, on, checking for hacked Pokemon, etc. So Smogon and Pokemon as itself are technically two different things. While Smogon uses Pokemon, they run by a different rule set, different logic. You've seen the PC, interface there. It runs off a completely separate thing. Mega Rayquaza, out of I think it's a vast majority of its sets in Smogon, if Rayquaza or Mega Rayquaza is allowed, it will have V-Create. The reason V-Create even existed was because it was a mystery gift event in Japan in Gen 5 Black and White. And yes, you could technically have got it in Black and White and transferred it up, and they kind of fixed that with Sword and Shield going forward, where you can reset, you can mark your Pokemon for that game, which will wipe its movesets. So it can't be used in any modern games. So if you see in a modern game, and you couldn't use it in VGC, but if you see a Mega Rayquaza with V-Create in game, it's one of those that I have to scratch my head about. Yes, you could absolutely have documented it, getting, going to Japan, getting this, bringing it up through the generations, right? You could absolutely have documented that. It is one of those that I look at and go, I don't really know about this. I mean, I can go on certain websites right now and see people selling, quote unquote, copies of it, for $10. And you can't do that. You can't, as far as I'm aware with Pokemon TOS, you can't do that. Now, is that going to stop somebody? Is that going to dissuade somebody? I can't, from a professional stance, I can't specifically say, go do this. In good faith, I can't. Being a professor reading that rule doc, I can't recommend that either. And Smogon can get away with it because they aren't Pokemon proper. So yeah, I could hop on Smogon right now on desktop or in browser, and I could generate a Rayquaza in-game, because all it is just a battle simulator. And in fact, people will, because of the grindy nature of Pokemon, getting competitive Pokemon battling, which did come into question at Worlds this year, right? Where it was an event recently. Pokemon really cracked down on stuff, and there were people saying that they needed a specific Pokemon for the event. And I think it was an Ursaluna. They needed like an Ursaluna or something for the event, and I saw this on Twitter. So they got it from a reputable vendor, but it ended up being coming across as hack checked. It didn't pass the hack check, and thus the player was DQ'd, right? Pokemon right now has an incredible issue, and I think this will feed into it. So if someone new comes in, right, and they start trying to look, well, why can't I get my V-Create Rayquaza, right? Why can't I get this, right? What are they going to do? They're going to look it up, and what's going to pop up? You're going to get, if you're going to read into the wikis, if you're going to read into Cerebi, if you're going to read in Bulbapedia, right? Yeah, you're going to see, V-Create down the list and be like, oh, okay, it's an event from Gen 5. However, if you're just looking for, I want to get this, you might end up on some kind of site and someone saying, hey, I'll trade you this. Give me $10-15 and I'll trade you this V-Create Rayquaza, even though it could be illegitimate. It really is one of those things that I feel at this point, having mystery gift locked things is a dated mechanic for Pokemon. And I guess this is everything kind of coalescing into my opinion on this. They need to either bring things back like Heal Pulse Mewtwo. Like, they need to bring things back so that way you can you can have them in game, and that point it cuts down on the cheating. Because the way we're going right now, and it's been a debate for years at this point, there's people that have reached out to me saying, well, did you see that Wolfie VGC did this? And I'm aware of the Magmar situation from, I think it was Black and White, right? I'm aware of that situation. I'm not fully researched enough to really comment on it, but I'm aware of the situation. And it's really just creating more problems at this point in time. If you're going to, I don't know, it's hard, because from a business standpoint, they don't recognize Smogon, or if they don't recognize Smogon, they don't recognize Pokemon Showdown. But from my understanding, they're not doing anything to take down Pokemon Showdown, which is, unless it's through Pokemon, it's not a use of their IP. So I'm kind of left scratching my head here, because it really is, in my opinion, a messy situation from both sides. You can have a new player saying, I want a V-Create Rayquaza, and they can't legitimately get a V-Create Rayquaza. Well, that sucks. You should have been Pokemon 10 years ago, sonny. Back in my day, I remember going to Japan and getting this, or my friend's dad uncle worked at Nintendo and got him this, and by golly, he traded. You see how that just breeds this really weird environment that honestly some people wouldn't even want to play? This has been a whole tangent in itself. So, I mean, one, more transformative. Two, if you're in Smogon, this is fine. It gets stickier once it's an actual game. And, I think Pokemon needs to really take a look at this. But then again, to be fair, Pokemon canceled the Yokohama Open via tweet and actually hasn't still said anything to my understanding. Pokemon's in a very weird state right now.
Right?
Oh, yeah,
V-Create as well.
is
180 base power move coming off of Rayquaza. So any steel type trying to take it, Band was legitimately good. You just need a Dragon Ascent, V-Create, Extreme Speed, and then your last move could be Earthquake if you wanted to. Like,
my favorite part about
Sadboy in chat says that's why Jenning is a thing, but that's the thing. Pokemon will not allow Jenning. If I was a Pokemon professor still, right, and I were to, which I'm not anymore, I'm not affiliated with Pokemon. I passed that background check, by golly, though. I passed it with flying colors. If I were to be a professor and I caught someone genning a Pokemon, I would then follow the disciplinary steps. I would see do they get a DQ? Do they get a game loss? Those are all things that have to be considered. And genning is not allowed, but genning is such a prevalent thing. And it's kind of weird because Pokemon simultaneously isn't cracking down on it. And we don't really, we have a definitive answer, but the follow-up's been kind of weird, if that makes sense. This right here is Pokemon Showdown. You see how it's using the models and it's a battle simulator? So I'm really confused where this falls at in terms of Pokemon using their brand, because this is clearly using Pokemon's IP, but is it with or without their consent, right? That's my question, because it feels like this would hurt their bottom line.
Rayquaza using
World's Drama.
is that you
Which
can't
one?
even weaken it with Kyogre's Rain because the rain doesn't pop up because of Delta Stream. This applies to regular.
If you're talking about the Yokohama Open, well, so we talked about the Yokohama Open, and Pokemon, from my understanding, still have not actually brought out a statement in regards to why they canceled that event on Twitter. Like, it was just a legitimate post of like, hey, by the way, this event is canceled. You know, all the other events, this event is no longer happening. All these other events will be happening. Thank you for your understanding. As far as I'm aware at time of recording this, like this, we still do not have an understanding of why that happened. And I don't think that's acceptable. I think we do need to say, Pokemon, what's going on? If I'm going to go to an event in, say, Singapore, wherever, right? If I'm going to go to a Pokemon event, and I get everything booked. I get everything, my the restaurants reservations booked. I get hotels booked. I get airfare, travel, all that. And I show up to the event, and in this case, 3 weeks before the event, and they're like, by the way, this event isn't happening. I'm going to feel a little sad at the very least. I'm going to feel a little frustrated, because what about the PTO, right? What about the PTO that people have to take out? The time off that, well, I was going to go to Pokemon. Well, now I can't rescind my time off because I've already burnt that with my work, right? Not everyone can just choose to not go to work to go to Pokemon, right? And that depends if you got your refundability protection, quote unquote, your insurance on your air tickets or not. Because as far as I'm aware, air tickets are non-refundable. Please do your research on that. And they usually upcharge to have insurance on that. So there's that one. But then there's the other one, which we did talk about, which was the crackdown, the seeming tightening of restrictions on Pokemon. Yeah. It was there was the player, right, who wanted the Ursaluna, right? And bought it from the vendor, and apparently it was genned, and so he got, DQ'd from the event? Yeah, I mean, it's weird because these have been in place all along, but if these have been in place all along, why have we not really seen it to this level up until this point? I think some transparency would help here, especially with the current state of Scarlet and Violet. I don't think they're really in an acceptable condition, to be fair still, and battling online makes my head hurt from the frame rate and the frame drops. I think at the very least they can be transparent with us.
Rayquaza too, because it has airlock, but it's really funny.
Nice.
And it actually, V-Create is so strong, you can basically look at it as Rayquaza gaining Fire Stab.
Yes.
I think the one counter people found was like Eviolite Porygon 2. They're like,
Eviolite
what's
Porygon
the
2 is
bulkiest
good
thing we can throw at this? First of all, being forced to run Eviolite Porygon 2 for it is ridiculous. Second of all, it's not even that good.
It is, sad boy. It is. As a former professor, it's been in the rules. These are things that we have to check for. So why has it not been an issue until this point, right? If these restrictions and these types of checks were always in place, we should have been seeing these long before now. This is nothing new. And in fact, when I went through my judge certification and paperwork, right? Yeah, we had troubleshooting steps. So, I mean, I don't know. I think this is just coming out of left field somewhere. And I think that it's either some Jenners got lazy. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. I would need someone from the VGC community to really discuss it.
A check because it's so strong. And what are you even doing back to it? It's, I use Swords Dance and my Ice Beam doesn't even hurt it because it just bounces off and now I lose.
Literally, you either get 2-shot if it's banned or if it's Lum. Yeah. What do you do? You Thunder Wave?
You really? I think this is a check to Mega Ray. Porygon 2 is really
just to let it be known what exactly happened with Arceus. When Gen 4 was the current gen, then the simulator used, that was the form for the community who made the rules to play on. Then that simulator could not implement Arceus correctly because Arceus in Gen 4 is released at level 100, and the only way you can give it EVs are through items like protein and calcium. And so you can only give it 100 EVs max in each stat. And
yeah, so the vitamin items used to be, I don't know if it was bugged or if this was an actual design decision. Until Sword and Shield, you could only give 10 vitamin items to a Pokemon. So if you wanted to raise its attack, you could only give 10 protein to a Pokemon before you could not give it any more protein. Now we can just give it 26 and bam, there's your 252, right? 260 minus 8 because it caps at 252. Bam, you're good. I think Sword and Shield did that correctly. One of the biggest hurdles to modern Pokemon is how much of a full-time job it can be to stay on top of the meta and just to play the game. It's way better than black and white, don't get me wrong. We've had things like bottle caps, we've had things like the mints come into play, we've had things like fixing the EV items, right? We have we have the EV items like power band, power bracer, power lens, etc., that help build up EVs if you don't have the money for the vitamins, right? We have better quality of life things, but it still is far from perfect, and I'd argue it's an antiquated system at this point. Pokemon, if they want a competitive scene, needs to lower that barrier to entry drastically from where it's at. And even then, there's some glaring omissions. Do you know how hard it is to get a 0 IV Cursula? Whether you want to keep it as Cursula or go into the big tree. I can't remember Cursula's evolution line, but you get what I'm saying, right? I think it was Galarian Corsola, which went into Cursula, right? Do you know how hard it is to get 0 IV speed or 0 IV things? Because there is an actual benefit to having 0 IVs in attack. There really is. So when you're confused and you hit yourself in your confusion, that is based off of your attack stat. So if you're a special attacker, say I'm Chandelure, right, and I'm not using any physical moves, I'm not using any on the physical side, like Flare Blitz, Flame Wheel, anything like that, there is benefit. Or say I'm Mewtwo Y, right, and I'm not using any physical moves. In both these, since we're using our special attack stat and nothing that is going to scale off of our attack, yeah, it makes sense to min-max a 0 in attack, 0 IV, 0 EVs in attack, to minimize the damage we would take from recoil. Yes, it's a very niche interaction, I understand that. However, if you are wanting to min-max, this is something that you have to consider. Trick Room as well, right? The slower a Pokemon is, the faster it can move outside of priority, right? So say you have a Torkoal versus Torkoal, and both of them are exactly the same, but one has a 0 IV and one has a 17 IV, right? Yeah, the one with 0 IVs under Trick Room, which the slowest Pokemon goes first, it's going to have the lower speed. Which, if that case, in this case, where say the Torkoal with 0 is genned, versus this person spending 100 hours to get a 17 IV Torkoal, right? One, that just feels disingenuous from a design perspective, right? Why did the person spending 100 hours into the game not have the advantage over somebody that just beep boop bop in some software, right? It is a large discussion that's been happening for years. I am not going to be the one to solve this. Just understand, when you get into competitive Pokemon, these are things you have to consider.
The Shoddy Battle, the program couldn't implement that correctly. They just never played with Arceus.
Game battle
and it was also released near the end of the generation. And then a few years later, we have a more advanced simulator now in Pokemon Showdown, and you can program Arceus with this 100 EV limit correctly, and enough of the player base said, and a lot of the older players were gone, so the newer players were like, let's give it a try, let's see what happens. And they played it for a year or so, and then Arceus was voted to be too much. It started out as, it was called Farceus because it couldn't be programmed incorrectly, but it just wasn't part of the game.
But they can't. So here's the thing though, there's certain things that you can acknowledge, right? So there have been certain fan things that I will not say here for HoloLive, right? There are certain fan things that I will not state here because I won't want to acknowledge them, that HoloLive just doesn't acknowledge, right? I love HoloLive. I love a lot of talent. I think they're a good agency. I think they treat their talent well. This is not a slight at HoloLive. If something incredibly egregious, profane, downright just awful is posted, sometimes not acknowledging something is the best course of action. In the case where, honestly, at this point, I don't even know if I want to get the Scarlet and Violet DLCs. I'd probably, if I want to play Pokemon, I'll clearly just go play Showdown, right? And when this is not just niche sentiment, that is going to affect Game Freak Pokemon companies. It's going to affect their bottom line. And that's the issue, is that this is, and as far as I'm aware, allegedly an unauthorized use of their IP in a manner that will affect their bottom line, right? And the amount of people that have said, I'll just go play Pokemon Showdown instead of buying the new game because they'll look at Scarlet and Violet and they'll just be like, nah, not for me. Yes, I had fun playing it. No, I don't think it's in an acceptable state. Still, even after a lot of the fixes, it shouldn't give me a headache from the frame rate.
Game by a sort of freak occurrence. And then it literally wound up getting the Mega Rayquaza treatment and getting banned. Before Mega Rayquaza in Gen 6, then banning something from Ubers was unthinkable. But you had clauses and stuff, like sleep clause and such.
Right.
But not actually banning Pokemon. But in Gen 4, the time of this Arceus unban and then reban in Gen 4 was after Mega Rayquaza, because it kept getting played after the fact.
Yeah. Old formats are still played, which is actually kind of great.
I remember playing the Zacian Crown metagame, and I remember thinking, this is really dumb. And I also...
Zacian is the product of a crowned and uncrowned. It is the product of an absolutely killer ability, an absolutely incredible offensive typing in Fairy Steel, and really that speed stat kind of just put... It's like what? With Zacian Crowned is like 148 or something like that, 144, 148. It's at base. It's nutty. Yeah, no, Scarlet and Violet did sell a lot of copies. That's the thing. I mean, I don't think a lot of people are going to tolerate much more of that, a product as unfinished as that, though. A product as buggy as that.
I remember thinking, this should not be in the tier. And I cannot understand why it has lasted as long as it has, because it's so clearly absurd.
Yes.
You've got Steel Fairy, which is maybe the best typing in the game.
It's best offensive, I'd argue.
Attack boost to a Pokemon that already has comical levels of attack. And its speed, it's so fast.
It's so fast.
Something when your metagame has Ditto in top 10 of it, like literally.
It's so bad. You're throwing like Quagsire and Tangrowth at it.
But Quagsire had to always recover, and didn't even.
Yeah.
I'm curious. There was actually speculation that Clodsire was going to be the Zacian answer. I'd be very curious to see the follow up on that.
Zacian,
which is the freest switch ever for literally everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember people were also using stuff like Assurance because it does double damage. So if rocks are up, then Quagsire actually gets destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was absolutely nuts. I was surprised that Zacian itself got banned. Not that it's that surprising, because it is still insanely fast and strong. Oh, that was the other thing. That it's so fast, it doesn't need to run anywhere near max speed. Yeah, you can for
138
speed.
Base speed, not on Crowned, on just regular Zacian. Base 138 speed. There are very few Pokemon that will outspeed this. This is a problematic set. Like, you don't need special attack as Zacian. That could be a 20 for all anyone cares. This is a problematic set. It is too bulky. It has way too much attack. Its HP stat is actually fairly good at 90. Like, we play Pokemon with like, what, 80, 85 easily, depending on what it is. This is a product of power creep. This is problematic in terms of design.
Ties, but if you prefer to handle it in other ways, then you get to invest in its bulk more, and it's also insanely bulky with amazing typing. So even if you do manage to withstand its hits, which is already a kind of ridiculous proposition, then you can't even kill it back. It's so if it was this strong and this fast, I could at least understand if it wasn't, you could hit it hard, but now you can. Like, earthquakes like bounce off of it.
Yeah.
It's comical.
Yeah, you also got to remember the regular Zacian could run a choice band, right? It could also run Swords Dance.
So there would be reason to run it.
It didn't have the initial power of that Zacian, of Zacian Crown, right? 170 versus 130. But if I put a choice band on there, plus I'm getting my Intrepid Sword.
Is problematic its own ways too.
And on top of that, being a sword,
the way it works is that choice band raises your attack stat itself. It doesn't apply a +1 boost. So the +1 is going off of that boosted attack stat. It's not going from +1 to +2, and that makes it way stronger.
Exactly.
And Zacian has that exact thing when it's got an Intrepid Sword boost and a choice band boost.
And then you have the one you really want to talk about, right? In Generation 9. Rewind a little
Calyrex.
bit to Gen 8 Ubers. What's the best
Calyrex? There were outs to Calyrex in Gen 8, so I don't know what Gen 9 introduced, why Calyrex is suddenly this S+ tier, anything goes level threat. Because, yeah, Astral Barrage is dumb. Oh, Terra, that's probably why, yeah. Because Astral Barrage is dumb, don't get me wrong. Like, I hated fighting it. But if you set up right, you could out it. It just required a little bit more finesse.
Shadow Rider answer. Yveltal, right? Mon's on 50, 60, 70, 80% of teams.
It's higher, right? Isn't it close to 100% use?
Almost, yeah. I remember in February, it was at 80%.
Calyrex, really?
Yveltal's basically Primal Groudon. You need to have it on your team, otherwise you will lose.
Otherwise you automatically lose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's funny because it's like the most extreme example, and these kinds of Pokemon that were completely helpless against Dark type. They don't have so much as a hidden power bug or something. They are completely stonewalled by Darks, but they are still insanely broken, because even if the opponent does have a Dark type, then it's just a matter of time until that thing dies, and then I destroy literally everything else. I think what you're getting at is that in Gen 9, you have Terastallization, and suddenly it's, now they do have a way past Dark types.
Yep, and even then, because of both Yveltal, and in this case also Ho-Oh, which was a decent check as well to Calyrex. We're both not in the tier.
The issue with Calyrex is that its as one ability is two abilities in one, right? It's Unnerve and I can't remember what the other one is, but it is two abilities in one, along with a really killer offensive set. I know Ice Rider was getting some love for a while, but I think Shadow Rider has just absolutely just crushed it in terms of just usage.
You don't always have to run Terra Fairy, Draining Kiss, Terra Fighting, Terra
boosted
Blast,
on kill.
right?
Okay, so it's like
A lot
Moxie.
of people would use Choice Specs and Choice Scarf, Terra Ghost, because your Astral Barrage is insanely powerful.
Yeah.
You're boosting it two times instead of 1.5 with the stab. You have your as one ability, which gives you, Grimnay and then a Nerve. So you're having your +1 special attack every single time. It was just so easy to snowball.
You will, and that snowball is the correct word there. You will snowball just that hard.
With this Pokemon, when you don't have the max speed def that is Yveltal, and even then, like Yveltal would lose.
I like that Claire
Dragapult
Dragapult
as well because of Terra. But even on top of that, you have substitute sets as well if you really wanted it. But the biggest things were Choice Scarf, Choice Specs, people using Focus Sash, and then Astral Barrage being the set I liked the most was simply Astral Barrage, Trick, Psychic, or Psyshock, depending, and Nasty Plot. Because if I found an opportunity to be able to set up with it, I could win. You would put it with Focus Sash, you'd put it with your choiced items, and just straight up, it was literally the most influential Pokemon, right?
The kind of
it really was
connective tissue between this and the Zacians and Mega Rayquaza is that they do literally do that thing that people expect of Ubers, which is that they outspeed and automatically destroy everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because
150 speed is absolutely nutty. Hey, how's it going? Welcome. Glad you like the videos. No, Calyrex Shadow is problematic. I mean, yeah, it's still pretty bulky. I mean, that 80, that was still Zacian levels of Zacian's lowest stat was 80 in special attack. This is nutty.
Calyrex Shadow is also really fast.
Yep. It was actually the fastest quick ban, I think, in Uber's history. So it got quick banned, right? I think like day one.
Not ban.
Or wouldn't even, it was like day one, day two,
really?
whatever. Yeah, and then they retested it.
Even Mega Rayquaza took a week. That was because Anything Goes didn't exist, so you had to literally...
Exactly, so we had to find...
I think you have an issue when because Gen 3, right? Well, I mean, aside from that one emulator, right? Gen 3, Mega Ray was the first Anything Goes ban, or at least the first popular Anything Goes ban, right? So when you go to Gen 8 and suddenly you have technically 3 Anything Goes ban between Gen 8 and 9, yet that was Gen 6. Mega Ray was Gen 6. Because Gen 4, the emulator, was the Arceus one they talked about. In Gen 8 and 9, if you have 3 separate Anything Goes levels of bans, I think there's an issue with power creep, and I think that something design-wise just isn't clicking here. And, we've already tried to see an answer. Remember Sun and Moon? How everything was super slow? Like, nothing got above, I think, like 70 or 80. Like, there were a few things that did, but Sun and Moon were very slow in terms of a metagame. Yeah, I think they've tried to course correct, and I do still think Sun and Moon is how Pokemon games should be in terms of VGC. You have your VGC decks. That is your quote-unquote format, right? So that means you could have Gen 10, say it was Gen 10, Sun 2, Moon 2, right? And you had all the Pokemon there, right? But you could have any Pokemon in the game, but you only have like 400 Pokemon total, right? So you maybe in Sun and Moon, Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon had access to Garchomp in the decks, but Sun 2, Moon 2, right, Gen 10, suddenly Garchomp doesn't have a regional dex number. It has a national dex, but not a regional dex number. Because it doesn't have a regional dex number, therefore it cannot be used in VGC. I think Sun and Moon, specifically Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, were the peak of VGC design and competitive Pokemon play design because of that. It made the most sense to me, and you still got to play around with whatever. You could play around with Sunkern, Sunflare, you could play around with Muck, Alolan Muck, which, I mean, still, as far as I'm aware, you can't even get in Scarlet Violet. I tried transferring it over. It's still not available yet, which I'm, consistently peeved about. So I'm left scratching my head because it just doesn't make sense. And that's the thing. People in chat have been saying they just need their own battle game. Yeah. Realistically, the only thing I would argue that's stopping Pokemon from making like a Stadium Switch or Stadium 3 or whatever, right, is going to be money, right? Because you could, if you made a game just for Stadium Coliseum, right, just for battling purposes, you could, in fact, throw every Pokemon, every model, every animation in a single game. And then you can go have Scarlet 2, Violet 2. You can go have ice and fire, right? Whatever Pokemon variants you want. And those will have whatever Pokemon wants to give you for that region, right? I think that's completely fair, but they'll never do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But that's still insane that it took 1 day. Not even.
It had to be. It was less than. I don't think it was even a full day went by.
42 bans. 42 votes to ban.
They retested it. They retested
42
it back
votes
in
to ban.
May when I believe Home came out. Or Home was coming out or whatever. So the end of May, right? So like Home came out and then it ended up being same decision, right? Mon ended up being officially banned from that. But okay, Calyrex was officially banned from Scarlet and Violet Ubers. It took 6 hours and 18 minutes.
Jesus,
that's how long it took them.
6 hours.
18 minutes.
That's hilarious.
It took them. That was actually. I'm sorry. That was after the suspect test. That was literally suspect test results.
Wow.
That
might be the
in 6 hours, 18 minutes
in any tier ever.
Yes, but that's after suspect results. So it got quick ban within about like a day and a half, whatever.
Yeah.
But the suspect results, enough people came up in 6 hours that it got banned the same day the thread was there.
That's actually.
One could also argue that unfortunately Pokemon just has their set meta Pokemon. Like we already have people, Urshifu's coming in, right? We have Urshifu already going to be on teams. Fluttermane's going to be on a vast majority of teams. We have Fluttermane teams going to be running Venusaur now because Venusaur works really well on those teams. If Landorus and Incineroar are in the game, you bet your ass they're going to be in the game, right? It feels just like we keep recycling back to the old metas, or at least old meta staples because they're so prominent. Sometimes I really wonder, man, I would like a VGC scene without Incineroar. Man, I'd like a VGC scene without, Landorus T, right? We're not really going to get it because people want to keep playing with those and they're staple enough that people will keep playing, right? I think that it is a design failure that these cycles keep repeating themselves, though. It's not that creativity can't happen. We have many, many Pokemon creators showcasing you don't need to play meta to win. It does turn into, like, what was it, 42 votes to ban versus 3 to not ban? That's an overwhelming amount of just, let's just not deal with this, and that's a problem.
No, that's ridiculous. I mean, I guess it's an easy way to illustrate to someone who doesn't really get how bans work. And the basic idea is there's nuance in competitive Pokemon, right? That's how the game is played or should be played. Yeah. And with Pokemon like these, even by Uber standards, to go back to that whole thing, Mewtwo is crazy fast and strong, but you can't just spam Psystrike or spam Psycho Boost Deoxys A and just destroy everything. And with these, they do literally just outrun everything and smash their way through it. Even the way you were listing the Calyrex set, it's, do I need coverage? No, I literally just need to make my stab stronger.
Yeah. No, when you can just brute force your way, there is a discrepancy in power at that point. I know this is a little bit of a long video. I know this turned into a lot of rants. The fact that we can't customize Pokeballs still 9 generations in is still kind of wild. So, well, at least like change it from you caught in a Pokeball, transfer to a Grace Ball, that kind of thing. It's still kind of weird to me. I will say that there is a lot to unpack with current Pokemon, and I did like this video. Don't get me wrong, I actually really like this video and illustrated a lot of the points very well. From I would argue, fringe player, I play when I can, right? I just haven't had time with the amount of work that I'm having to do. It is unfortunately one of those things that it just doesn't have an easy solution. I think there's things that Pokemon Company, that Game Freak could be doing better, absolutely. And that isn't me just saying, make better game than Scarlet Violet. No, I do think that there's design decisions here that are just being made that they lead to a detrimental game state, let's put it that way. And, I want to be excited for Pokemon. I really do. And I did have fun with Scarlet and Violet. I'm at this point with how the Pokemon Company, Game Freak, is treating the games. I might as well just go play Showdown at that point, because at the very least, it's less of a time investment for me to have fun playing Pokemon battles, which I'm really there to do. That's all I'm there to do. Just hop into Pokemon Showdown or, play modified versions of older games that I own, right? Because I own Coliseum and XD, right? So maybe doing a Nuzlocke randomizer, etc. of those, then buy new games that are just going to make me just a little sad. But I digress. What were your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Pokemon state of the game? You going to be buying the Scarlet Violet DLCs? Or you're not going to be buying Scarlet Violet DLCs? Do you think that you're going to be out with the next Pokemon entry? Do you think that you're going to stick with Pokemon Showdown? Thoughts in the description, in the comments, blah, 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 words. And I will see you on the channel next time.